When we sell the app through the App Store, the developer gets 70% of the revenues right off the top. We keep 30% to pay for running the App Store.
This is how Steve Jobs introduced the App Store back in 2008. It was a revolutionary idea. Apple would connect developers with millions, if not billions of users. And in return, Apple would take a 30% cut on sales. Seemed fair, right? But over the years, this simple revenue model turned into something much bigger. It wasn't just about Apple making money. It became about how Apple controls the entire playing field. And no company has fought harder against this control than Spotify. At first glance, this might seem like just a business dispute. Apple wants a cut, Spotify doesn't want to pay. But when you look closer, this case reveals something much deeper. So today, we're not just talking about Spotify versus Apple. We're talking about Apple's entire strategy and how they make it almost impossible for competitors to fight on equal terms. This is the Spotify versus Apple case. For the first few years of the App Store's life, Apple did not have any specific rules regarding subscriptions bought through an app. But in 2011, they launched a payment system for subscriptions and forced Spotify to use this. This meant that every time a user chose to upgrade from a free to a premium account through the iOS app, Apple would take 30% of the revenue. Since Spotify was already struggling to make money, they could simply not afford that, so they chose to completely disable upgrades through the app. This was of course not ideal for Spotify, as they were missing out on many users that would want to upgrade to the premium subscription, but chose not to because it was just too difficult. They therefore decided to adopt Apple's system and therefore had to add 30% to their prices in order to pay for the tax. This meant that if you, as a user, signed up through the app, it would cost you 30% more than if you signed up through the website. You may be thinking, but why wouldn't you just tell the user about this? Well, they wanted to, but the only issue is that Apple does not allow such information. And Apple then went on to first reject Spotify from being played through Siri, and then put their app on the Apple Watch. This may seem a bit confusing why they would do that, but just a few months later, they launched their own Spotify competitor called Apple Music. At that point, Spotify had had enough and started a case against them in the EU, arguing that Apple should not be allowed to make rules that only apply to Spotify but not their own competing service, because this was simply unfair. Apple have made many arguments in this case and fought back against Spotify in different ways. First of all, they only take 30% the first year and then it drops down to 15%. And they have also made a questionable option to use a non-Apple payment processor, but they still take a 27% fee from that. But the main argument is basically what Steve Jobs said in the original App Store presentation.
We keep 30% to pay for running the App Store. There are no credit card fees for the developer. We take care of all that. There are no hosting fees for us hosting the app. We take care of all that. There's no marketing fees. The developer gets 70% of the revenues and it's paid monthly. This is the best deal going to distribute applications to mobile platforms. Now, we talk about the 70-30 revenue split, but the developer gets to pick the price. And you know what price a lot of developers are going to pick? Free, right? So when a developer wants to distribute their app for free, there is no charge for free apps.
And to be fair towards Apple, they are not the only ones taking a revenue cut. Steam takes a similar cut, the same does Google. On YouTube they even take 45%. And there has also been a lot of discussion about how Spotify also keeps around 30% of their revenue and pay the rest to their artists. I was unable to find a definitive answer to this question, but regardless, on the surface at least, it looks a bit ironic that Spotify is complaining so much. And the reason why Spotify is going specifically after Apple is just because Apple is so big. And they make it so difficult for Spotify to get onto your Apple Watch, Siri and the HomePod. Spotify does not think it is fair that they cannot compete on an even ground with Apple Music. As they say, Apple is both the referee and one of the players at the same time. But honestly, it is not that interesting to understand exactly what has happened in the legal case. Other than the EU have forced them to change the way of doing things, but then Apple fought back in a very Apple way and so on. But what I'm way more interested in is, why is Apple behaving in this way? Is it just about the money? Is it because Tim Cook is so thirsty for money that he just needs to force apps like Spotify to use his own payment processor and pay the 30% cut? As far as I understand, this is how Apple sees the situation. We made a phone, and we made an app store that allows developers to reach all of our customers. Therefore, we make the rules, and it is only fair that we take some cut from their revenue. Because if we did not distribute that app, they were not going to make any money. While this is a valid explanation, there's something much deeper going on here, which relates to Apple's entire strategy. Within business strategy research, there's something called the resource-based view, which is an area of research which assumes that the best way for a company to compete is through its resources. This can be knowledge, products, employees, and so on. This view suggests that in order to achieve a sustained competitive advantage, you can pick between a few different strategies. One of them is what they call rivalry restraint. The textbook example of this is Apple. No, seriously, the literal example used in my university textbook was Apple. So what does this mean? Well, it means that Apple has this ecosystem, which they want you to enter. And importantly, other companies cannot participate in the ecosystem. Otherwise, this strategy would not work. This means that Apple is the only company that can sell phones with iOS, is the only company that controls the App Store, and is the only company that can make other products that play well with your iPhone. I'm sure you have heard it before. When you have an iPhone, it is very convenient if you also get a Mac, and then it is really convenient if you then also get the AirPods. And then, before you know it, you're paying for iCloud every month, you have an Apple TV, you have an Apple credit card. The whole idea behind this strategy is maximizing one thing: switching costs. This means making you so reliant on the ecosystem that you don't bother making the switch. Every time you add another product that the user uses, the switching cost becomes higher and higher. And how does this then relate back to the 30% cut and Spotify? Well, if you sign up for Spotify through the iOS app, you're forced to use Apple's payment processor, another thing that Apple controls, and that makes it more difficult for you to switch. And furthermore, Apple wants you to compare the price of Spotify to that of Apple Music, or even better, their Apple One bundle. Because if they can get you to switch to that bundle, you don't only get Apple Music, but also iCloud, Apple TV Plus, Apple News Plus, and more. And once you have that deal, they have increased your switching costs even more. The higher cut that Apple takes, the better their own prices look, and the more they can increase the switching cost. And of course, it also helps that iPhone sales are down and that Apple relies more and more on services to make money. But for Apple, that is also fine, because as long as you stay in their ecosystem, you will eventually upgrade your phone and your laptop at some point. And when you buy an app, you will use their payment processor. And here's the real question: should Apple even be allowed to do this? If you built the iPhone, made the App Store, created the ecosystem, shouldn't you be allowed to make the rules? I think everybody agrees that they should take a revenue cut, but 30% just seems like a lot. Because of the EU case, they have made some new initiatives that means that they only take a 15% cut of developers making less than $1 million per year, which is great. But that does of course not affect Spotify. I'm curious what you guys think. When I recorded my last video a few days ago only, I had 11 subscribers. But now, I don't know what happened, but suddenly I have like 300. So yeah, I'm really thankful for all of the support and all of the subscribers and views and comments. It truly means a lot to me. Yeah, I'm very thankful for that. And I have read all of the positive comments. I have tried to also work on the stuff that was recommended to me, mostly the audio quality. So let me know if that is better this time. Please let me know if you want like a Discord community or something where we could hang out and connect. But yeah, so thank you so much for watching. I'm very grateful for your support.